Digital divide. When we hear this term, we think of parts of the world that do not have an internet connection. The first thing that comes to mind are countries like Africa, which Farviar notes as a blackout continent. It lags behind in electricity production and internet connectivity. He does note, however, Farviar also notes that South Africa actually is regarded as a contemporary beacon of hope for connectivity in this blackout continent. South Africa has 11% of their population online and connected to the internet. So the rest of the continent then hopes that it can be so successful as well. Although this issue of the digital divide is very legitimate, there are other reasons that we think of divide in a different way. In fact, we even think of digital divides, plural. Elsesser notes that these digital divides are based on age, gender, and disability. Her article talks about the failure of technology to take into consideration those disabilities for connecting to the internet and other disabilities around technology use. She also mentions different acts in history that have given attention to disabilities, and notes that there has been a switch of society from the medical model of disability to a societal model. The medical model treated individual disabilities as an individual tragedy, whereas the societal model saw that disability was a societal responsibility, and that as long as everything was made accessible, no one in society would actually be disabled. So she explains the difference between accommodation and universal design. Accommodation is like a Band-Aid, a retrofit solution that is made after the fact, or a one-time fix to a problem, or some sort of issue with accessibility. So, she introduces the term universal design. A universal design would allow all sorts of variations of body types and would also adjust to any needs and preferences that society had. This term variation is key to Elsesser's argument. That variation will provide a broader understanding of access. So, variation and universal design will go hand in hand. Variation and the universal design to accommodate that puts the user at the center, allowing for a variety of users, but on the downside, usually fails to be commercially practical. So, I decided to look at a screen reading technology called JAWS, which actually reads to the user what is on the screen.
12 headings and 158 links. Blind Inspiration cast list of 5 items. Visited link or posts. Link inspirations. Link Doctor Who. Link about. Link subscribe. List end. Heading level 1 link Doctor Who S05
As you can tell, the JAWS screen reader does trip up on words and includes a lot of numbers, some things that aren't very accurate. The woman using the screen reader then described how it worked and how it was helpful to her.
You heard a number of things there. I have my JAWS set to speak fairly quickly, and also I have what is a vocal software. JAWS has intense personalized settings. You can change the accent, you can change the language.
I also found a TED Talk which explained how Apple products have been much more accessible than PC products recently.
My name's Austin Serafin. I've been blind since birth. I started programming when I was 7 on an Apple IIe. That was the first computer with a screen reader. And that's how a blind person uses a computer. They use a program that reads to them. I got my first PC in 1990 and used MS-DOS all through the 90s. We entered kind of a dark age of accessibility, coincidentally, when Windows became dominant. The advantage to building accessibility into something as Apple did, as a core part of the product instead of just an afterthought. It's also much more helpful to think of accessibility in terms of a spectrum, that is, from no accessibility to total accessibility.
So there's this setting on the iPhones that is VoiceOver, which is what he was talking about in that TED video. So what you can do is actually turn on accessibility shortcuts in addition to VoiceOver, or even by using it. And then you'll have this little button up here that tells you that you can use these accessibility shortcuts. So for mobile impairments, visual impairments, hearing impairments, you can deal with your iPhone in a way that will actually allow you to set certain gestures, like a scroll function as displayed on the screen. you can set this to swipe up and down to scroll on the internet or the Safari app, and then you'll be able to just tap in order for it to scroll. So if you do have a mobile impairment which doesn't allow you to scroll physically, all you'll have to do is tap. So the iPhones are really working, and Apple itself is working towards making products that are accessible, products that take into account this variation that Elsesser mentions, the variation of bodies that may need something else and that may not be able to see the screen, use the screen, or hear a YouTube video as well. So there is this notion of the digital divide, and we take that into account with these blackout countries like Africa. But there's also the notion of digital divides, which now finally is not being completely ignored. The sources I used were Bridging Disability Divides, The Internet of Elsewhere, and I also interviewed my coworker. I did find those TED Talks and other videos on YouTube as well.